The trading station hung in the darkness of space like a metal flower, blooming against the swirling colors of the gas giant below. And hundreds of species walked its corridors every day seeking profit and opportunity, and sometimes just a place to rest between the long journeys that connected the stars. Sealith pressed her face against the observation window and watched a cargo ship drift toward the docking bay, its hull marked with symbols she did not recognize. And her bioluminescent skin flickered with soft purple light that revealed her excitement to anyone who understood her kind. She was 40 cycles old, which made her a child by Volanthi standards. And this was her first trip away from her homeworld, a journey her uncle Torvan had promised would teach her about commerce and the galaxy, and the strange beings who filled it. Stay close to the booth, her uncle had warned, before leaving to negotiate with a Centharian merchant 3 levels up. The station is safe, but you are young and curious, and curiosity has led many young Volanthi into trouble. Sealith had promised to stay close, and she had meant it at the time. But the lower cargo levels called to her with their mysterious shadows and the distant sounds of machinery and the promise of something she had never seen before. She told herself she would only explore for a few minutes. The cargo level was colder than the trading floors above, and the lights were dimmer, casting long shadows between the massive containers that held goods from 100 different worlds. And Sealith found herself walking deeper into the maze of metal boxes without really deciding to do so. Her skin glowed a nervous yellow as she realized she had lost track of the path back to the lift. You should not be down here. The voice came from behind a stack of containers, and Sealith jumped backward with a small cry of surprise, her bioluminescence flashing bright white in alarm. A figure stepped out of the shadows, and Sealith needed a moment to understand what she was seeing because she had never met a human in person before. The woman was shorter than Sealith expected, with dark hair pulled back from her face and small brown eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And she wore the simple gray uniform of a cargo inspector with a scanner device clipped to her belt. "I am sorry," Sealith said quickly, her translator converting her musical Volanthi speech into the flat sounds of Galactic Common. "I was exploring, and I became lost, and I did not mean to enter a restricted area." The human woman studied her for a long moment, and Sealith found herself unsettled by those small eyes that gave away nothing of what the woman was thinking. "This level is not restricted," the woman said finally, "just empty at this hour, and not interesting enough for most visitors to bother with." "I find it very interesting," Sealith said, and she meant it. Everything is interesting when you have never seen it before. The human made a sound that Sealith's translator could not interpret, something between acknowledgement and amusement. And then she extended her hand in what Sealith had learned was a human greeting gesture. "Unipark," the woman said. "Cargo inspector for the night shift." Sealith carefully touched her fingertips to the human's palm, the way her uncle had taught her, and she was surprised by the warmth of the contact, because she had heard that humans were a cold species in temperament, if not in body. "Temperature. I am Sealith of the Volanthi trading family Torvan," she said formally. "I am here with my uncle to learn about commerce among the stars." "A student," Una said, and there was something in her voice that might have been warmth. "Learning is a good reason to be anywhere." They talked for a while in the dim light of the cargo bay, and Sealith found herself fascinated by this strange, soft creature who seemed so fragile and yet carried herself with a quiet confidence that Sealith did not understand. Humans had no natural weapons that Sealith could see. No claws or fangs or armored skin or venom glands. And their eyes were so small that they must struggle to see in low light. And yet this species had spread across the galaxy and built colonies on worlds that would kill most other beings. "How do your people survive?" Sealith asked without thinking. And then she flickered an embarrassed blue because she realized the question might be rude. I mean, no offense, but you seem so vulnerable compared to many species. Yuna considered the question seriously rather than taking offense. And Sealith appreciated that about her. We are stubborn, Yuna said simply. We do not give up easily, and we help each other. And sometimes that is enough. Sealith wanted to ask more questions. But a sound from the far end of the cargo bay made both of them turn their heads. One of the large cargo doors was sliding open, and something was moving in the darkness beyond it. Something big that made heavy sounds as it walked. Sealith felt her skin go cold and pale as the shape emerged into the dim light. It was a Kethro. She had seen images of them in her educational programs and heard stories from traders who had encountered them. And every story ended with warnings to run and hide if you ever saw one in person. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall on 4 powerful legs, with a torso that rose up to support 2 arms, ending in claws that could tear through metal. And its head was a nightmare of teeth and 4 nostrils that flared as it tasted the air. Kethrol were predators from a death world, even more dangerous than the one humans came from. And they had been banned from most civilized stations because they could not or would not control their hunting instincts. This one had clearly smuggled itself aboard somehow, and now it was looking directly at Sealith with hunger in its 6 black eyes. Valanthi, the creature said, and its voice was like stones grinding together. Young and tender and far from home, Sealith could not move, could not think, could not do anything except stand frozen as her skin flickered through every color of terror she knew. The Kethrol took a step forward, and then another. And it was savoring the moment the way predators always did when they knew their prey had nowhere to run. And then Yuna Park stepped in front of Sealith, blocking the path between the child and the monster. The Kethrol stopped, more surprised than threatened. And it looked down at this small, soft human who barely reached its chest, even when it lowered itself on its legs. Move aside, little thing, the Kethrol said. I am no quarrel with your kind today, and if you step away, I will let you live. But if you stay, I will kill you first, and it will not be quick. Yuna did not move. She did not speak. She simply looked up at the Kethrol with those small dark eyes that gave away nothing. The Kethrol made a grinding sound that Sealith realized was laughter. Do you not understand what I am? It asked. Do you not see the death standing before you? Because I have killed things 10 times your size, and I will kill you as easily as breathing if you do not step aside. Still, Yuna did not move. Sealith wanted to scream at her to run. Wanted to tell her that dying for a stranger was foolish and pointless and would not save anyone. But her voice was trapped in her throat, along with everything else. The Kethrol leaned forward until its face was close enough to the human that Sealith could see the moisture on its teeth. What do you think you can do against me, little human? It asked. The cargo bay had become a frozen moment in time, with the massive Kethrol looming over the small human woman and Sealith trembling behind them both, her bioluminescent skin flickering through shades of white and pale yellow that screamed her terror to anyone who could read her kind. Yuna Park had not moved since stepping between Sealith and the predator, and she did not move now, even as the Kethrol's hot breath washed over her face, carrying the smell of old meat and something sour that might have been poison from the glands in its throat. Asked you a question, human, the Kethrol growled, and its voice vibrated through the metal floor and up through Sealith's legs. What do you think you can do against me? Yuna said nothing. She simply continued to look up at the creature with those small dark eyes that revealed nothing of what was happening inside her mind. The Kethrol shifted its weight, and its claws scraped against the floor with a sound like knives being sharpened. And Sealith realized she had stopped breathing at some point and forced herself to start again. I have killed humans before, the Cathrall said. And there was something strange in its voice now. Something that Sealith could not identify. Your kind is soft and weak, and you die as easily as any prey. So why do you stand there looking at me, as if you believe you can stop what is about to happen? Still Yuna did not speak. Still she did not move. Sealith watched from behind and noticed something that confused her deeply because the human's hands were not shaking. And her breathing was slow and steady, and her shoulders were relaxed rather than tense with the fear that should have been flooding through her body. The Cathrall noticed it too. You are strange, it said. And now Sealith could hear something in its voice that shocked her because it sounded almost like uncertainty. Most prey begs by now or runs or at least trembles. But you just stand there looking at me with those tiny eyes. Yuna blinked once, slowly, and then resumed her unbroken stare. The Cathrall took a small step backward, and then seemed angry at itself for doing so. And it snarled and showed more of its teeth, as if to remind everyone, including itself, of how dangerous it was. Stop. Looking at me like that, it demanded. Yuna did not stop. Sealith found herself watching the human woman now, instead of the predator, because something impossible was happening right in front of her. Something that went against everything she had learned about how the universe worked. Predators hunted prey, and prey ran from predators, and that was the simple truth that governed survival on every world in the galaxy. But Yuna Park was not following that truth, and the Cathrall did not seem to know what to do about it. Memories flickered through Yuna's mind. Memories she did not share, but that shaped the steel in her spine and the calm in her eyes. She remembered being 16 years old and walking home late at night, when a man twice her size had stepped out of an alley and demanded her money. And she remembered looking at him without speaking, until he had cursed and walked away because something in her eyes had told him this would not be worth the trouble. She remembered standing in her captain's office on a cargo ship 5 years ago, when he had ordered her to sign documents that would have hidden illegal weapons in a shipment to a war zone. And she remembered looking at him in silence until he had thrown the documents in the trash and told her to get out of his sight. She remembered her grandmother back on Earth teaching her that some things were worth dying for, and that when you faced one of those moments you had to decide who you were and then be that person completely without hesitation or doubt. She had decided years ago that she would not let innocent people be harmed if she could prevent it, and she had made peace with what that decision might cost her. And now that peace was in her eyes for the Cathrall to see, "There's something wrong with you," the Cathrall said. And now it took another step backward without seeming to realize it. "Your kind should fear me. Every species fears me. I am death walking on 4 legs." Yuna finally blinked again. Sealith noticed with growing shock that the human still had not blinked more than twice since this confrontation began. And she realized that the Cathrall had noticed too. Among predator species, eye contact was a challenge. A declaration that you were not prey, that you would fight, that you would make the kill cost more than it was worth. And most beings could not maintain that kind of contact for more than a few seconds before. Looking away in submission, Yuna had been staring at the Cathrall for nearly 3 minutes without breaking. "Why do you not run?" the Cathrall asked. And its voice had changed again because now it sounded almost confused. "Why do you not beg? Why do you not try to bargain for your worthless life? What is wrong with you humans that you just stand there and look at me?" "Maybe she is too stupid to understand the danger," suggested a voice in the Cathrall's mind. But it dismissed that idea immediately because it could see the intelligence in those small dark eyes. Intelligence and something else that it was struggling to identify. Something it had only seen a few times before in its long life of hunting and killing, something that made it uncomfortable. In a way, it did not want to examine. When I killed humans before, the Kethral said slowly, almost as if it were talking to itself. They always fought. Even when they were broken and bleeding and had no chance of survival, they kept fighting. And I had to destroy them completely before they would stop. Seelith felt her skin shift to a confused pattern of colors, because she did not understand why the predator was telling them this. I learned to avoid your kind when possible, the Kethral continued. Not because you are strong, because you are not. Not because you are fast, because you are slow, but because killing you is never simple and never clean, and you always make me pay for the victory. It stared down at Una with its 6 black eyes. And something passed between them that Seelith could not see, but could somehow feel. A silent conversation conducted in the space between Predator and whatever Una was. I see that in your eyes now, the Kethral said. I see someone who has already decided to fight and has already accepted death and has already calculated how much pain she will cause me before she falls. And I ask myself whether one young Volanti is worth that price. Seelith gasped softly as she understood what was happening. The Kethral was afraid not of losing the fight, because it would certainly win, but of winning and paying the cost that victory would require. The wounds and the pain and the knowledge that this small soft human would make it earn every drop of blood. I did not expect to find a human here, the Kethral admitted. I tracked the child's scent through the station, and I thought the cargo levels would be empty and I could feed without witnesses. But you were here, and now everything is complicated. Una still said nothing, and her silence was louder than any words could have been. The Kethral snarled in frustration. Say something, it demanded. Scream or beg or threaten me or do anything except stand there looking at me like I am the prey, and you are the predator. But Una only looked, and her eyes never wavered, and somewhere deep in the Kethral's hunting brain, a voice was whispering that this was not worth it, that there would be other prey on other days, that this human with her strange eyes was more dangerous than she appeared. Seelith watched the impossible unfold before her, and her skin glowed with colors she did not have names for, because no Volanti had ever needed to describe the feeling of watching a monster hesitate before something smaller and weaker than itself. The Kethral took another step backward, and another, and then it stopped and seemed to gather itself. Because predators did not retreat from prey, and it was a predator, and Una was just a human, and this was absurd. I will kill you, it promised. I will tear you apart, and then I will take the child, and no one will ever know what happened here. And I will not let your strange eyes stop me. Una spoke for the first time since the confrontation began, and her voice was flat and quiet and somehow more frightening than the Kethral's growl. You made a mistake, she said. The words hung in the cold air of the cargo bay like smoke that refused to fade, and Seelith felt her skin flicker through a dozen shades of confusion as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The Kethral, a creature that could tear through metal with its claws and had killed hundreds of beings across a dozen worlds, was standing frozen in front of a human woman who barely reached its chest, and neither of them had moved for what felt like hours. What did you say to me? The Kethral demanded, and its voice cracked with something that might have been disbelief. You made a mistake, Una repeated in that same flat voice. You came to this station looking for easy prey, and you found something else instead. And now you are standing here, trying to decide whether one meal is worth the trouble. I am going to cause you. The Kethral snarled and began pacing back and forth in front of Una, its 4 legs carrying it in a tight pattern that spoke of agitation and uncertainty. And Seelith realized that the predator was fighting a battle inside its own mind. I could kill you in seconds, it said. Maybe. Una agreed. I could tear your arms from your body before you could raise them to defend yourself. Maybe. I could crush your skull with one bite, and you would be dead before you felt the pain. Maybe. The Kethril stopped pacing and stared at her with all 6 of its black eyes. And Seelith could see the confusion in its body language, even though she did not know its species well enough to read the subtle signs. "Why do you keep saying maybe?" it demanded. "You should say yes. You should acknowledge that I am stronger and faster and more deadly than you will ever be. Why do you refuse to admit the obvious truth?" Yuna tilted her head slightly, the first significant movement she had made since stepping in front of Seelith. And something in that small gesture made the Kethril flinch, because maybe is not the same as certain, she said. "And you know that? Which is why you are still talking instead of attacking." Seelith watched this exchange with growing amazement, her bioluminescent skin shifting to colors that expressed emotions she had never felt before. Combinations of fear and hope and something that might have been awe. She had never imagined that words could be weapons, but Yuna was using them like blades, cutting away the Kethril's confidence one piece at a time. "I will explain something to you, Volanti child," the Kethril said suddenly, turning some of its attention to Seelith while keeping most of its eyes fixed on Yuna. "I will explain what I see when I look at this human. And then you will understand why this moment is so strange." Seelith wanted to ask why the predator was explaining anything, instead of simply attacking, but her voice still refused to work properly. "Among my kind," the Kethril continued, "eye contact is everything. It is how we establish dominance and submission. It is how we decide who is predator and who is prey. And when I look into the eyes of most beings, I see fear and submission and the desperate hope that I will pass them by." It gestured at Yuna with one clawed hand. "But when I look into her eyes, I see none of those things. I see something that my instincts cannot process properly. Something that makes the hunting part of my brain very uncomfortable." "What do you see?" Seelith asked. And her voice came out as barely a whisper. The Kethril was silent for a long moment. And when it spoke again, its voice was different, quieter and more thoughtful than before. "I see the eyes of a creature that has already decided to die," it said. "I see someone who has calculated the cost of fighting me and accepted that cost completely. Someone who has made peace with death and is now simply waiting to see what happens next." It shook its massive head. "I have seen that look before. On my homeworld, in the eyes of prey animals that had been cornered and had no escape. They would sometimes stop running and turn to face me with that same calm acceptance. And those were always the most dangerous kills." "Dangerous how?" Seelith asked. "Because they would fight with everything they had," the Kethril said. "They had nothing to lose and they knew it. So they would bite and claw and tear at me with a fury that the fear of death usually prevents. And even though I always won, I would carry the wounds for days afterward." It looked at Yuna again, and Seelith could see something like respect in its eyes, mixed with frustration and confusion. "But those were animals acting on instinct," the Kethril continued. "This human is something different. She has made a conscious choice to stand here and die rather than let me reach you. And that choice has changed something in her eyes that I cannot fight against with teeth and claws." Yuna spoke again, and her voice was still flat, but there was something almost gentle in it now. "You have been talking for a long time," she observed. "Station security was alerted when you triggered the cargo bay sensors, and they will be here in approximately 4 minutes. The Kethril hissed in frustration. "You knew that all along," it accused. "I knew that I needed to keep you occupied long enough for help to arrive." Yuna agreed. "And I knew that you would not attack while we were talking because talking meant you had not committed to fighting yet. And as long as you had not committed, you could still convince yourself that walking away was your choice and not your defeat." Seelith felt her mouth fall open in shock. The human had been manipulating the predator the entire time, using psychology and patience and those strange still eyes to buy time for rescue to arrive. And the Kethral had not even realized what was happening until Una chose to tell it. "You tricked me." The Kethral snarled. "I survived," Una corrected. "Tricking implies that I lied to you, but everything I said was true. I was prepared to fight you, and I was prepared to die. And you saw that truth in my eyes, which is why you hesitated." The Kethral's claws scraped against the floor as it shifted its weight, clearly considering whether 4 minutes was enough time to kill both of them and escape. Before security arrived, "I could still do it," it said. "I could kill you both right now and be gone before they find your bodies. You could try." Una agreed, "but you would have to get past me first. And you have already admitted that fighting someone who does not fear death is more dangerous than you like. And you do not know how much noise I will make when you attack, or how long I can keep you occupied with my dying, or whether the wounds I give you will be worth what you gain." She paused. 4 minutes is not a long time, but it might be longer than you think when you are fighting someone who refuses to make it easy for you. The Kethral stared at her for a long moment, and Seelith could see the calculation happening behind its eyes, the weighing of risks and rewards that every predator performed before committing to a hunt. "I have hunted across 100 worlds," it said finally. "I have killed thousands of beings from hundreds of species. I have faced warriors and soldiers and creatures 10 times my size. And I have never hesitated the way I am hesitating now." It took a step backward. "There is something wrong with your species," it said. "Something in your eyes that should not exist. Something that makes predators like me uncomfortable in ways we cannot explain. And I do not think I will ever understand what it is." Una did not respond. She simply continued to look at the Kethral with those calm, dark eyes that had somehow turned a monster into a creature full of doubt. 3 minutes left. The Kethral snarled once more, but this time it sounded more like frustration than threat. "What would you have done if I had attacked?" it asked. "What could you possibly have done against me with your soft body and your small teeth and your complete lack of natural weapons?" Una smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. "Whatever was necessary," she said. Seelith watched as something fundamental shifted in the cargo bay, a change that she could feel in her bones, even though nothing visible had happened. And she realized that the confrontation had entered a new phase, that she did not fully understand. Una had taken a single step forward. It was a small movement, barely noticeable. Just a few centimeters of distance closed between her and the massive predator that could end her life in seconds. But the effect was devastating. The Kethral took a step backward. Seelith's skin erupted in colors of pure shock because she had never seen anything like this before. Had never imagined that prey could advance on a predator and make that predator retreat. Had never conceived of a universe where size and strength and natural weapons meant less than the look in someone's eyes. "What are you doing?" the Kethral demanded. And there was something in its voice that Seelith had never expected to hear from such a creature. Something that sounded almost like panic. Una did not answer. She took another step forward. The Kethral took another step backward, its forelegs moving in an awkward shuffle that spoke of confusion and instincts at war with each other. And Seelith realized that the predator's body wanted to run even though its mind insisted that running was impossible. "Stop," the Kethral commanded. "Stop moving toward me. You have no right to approach me like this. You are prey, and I am the hunter, and you should be running away, not walking forward." Una stopped, but only because she seemed satisfied with the distance she had established, and she continued to look up at the Kethral with those strange calm eyes that seemed to see straight through its armor and teeth and claws to something vulnerable underneath. Seelith found herself staring at the human woman with new eyes, trying to understand what she was seeing, trying to make sense of a creature that defied everything she knew about how the universe worked. The Volanti were empaths. able to read emotional states through the bioluminescent patterns of their own kind, and through more subtle cues in other species. And Seelith had been taught since childhood that humans were difficult to read because they lacked the glowing skin that made emotions visible, but eyes were universal. And as Seelith studied Yuna's eyes, she began to understand what the Kethral had been talking about, began to see the thing that had turned a terrifying predator into a confused and hesitant creature. There was no fear in those eyes, not because Yuna was too stupid to understand the danger, and not because she had some hidden weapon that made her confident in victory, but because she had simply decided that fear was not relevant to this moment. She was afraid. Seelith realized she had to be afraid because any sane being would be afraid of a Kethral. But she had taken that fear and put it somewhere deep inside herself where it could not control her actions or show in her expression. And in the space where fear should have been, there was something else. Something that Seelith could only describe as complete commitment. This human had looked at the situation and decided that Seelith would not die today, had made that decision with her whole being and accepted whatever consequences came with it. And now she was simply waiting to see whether the universe agreed with her choice or punished her for making it. The Kethral saw the same thing, and it terrified the predator in ways that its instincts could not process. "Among my people," the Kethral said slowly, almost as if it were trying to explain the situation to itself, "we hunt through fear. We intimidate our prey until they panic and run and make themselves vulnerable. And then we strike when they are too terrified to fight back effectively." It gestured at Yuna. "But you refuse to be intimidated. You refuse to panic. You refuse to run. And my hunting instincts do not know what to do with prey that acts like a predator. My brain keeps insisting that you must be dangerous, even though I can see that you are soft and weak and should be easy to kill. Evolution is a powerful thing," Yuna said quietly. "Your instincts evolved to keep you safe from threats. And they are warning you that I am a threat. You should probably listen to them." The Kethral snarled in frustration. "You are bluffing," it said. "You have to be bluffing. You cannot actually be as dangerous as my instincts are telling me because that would be impossible." "Maybe I'm bluffing," Yuna agreed. "Maybe I'm just a small soft human with no claws and no fangs and no chance of hurting you. Maybe everything I've done has been an act designed to buy time until help arrives." She paused. "But maybe I am not bluffing. Maybe I really am as dangerous as your instincts are telling you. Maybe humans developed something during our evolution that you cannot see or measure, but that makes us genuinely threatening even to predators like you." The Kethral stared at her. "Which possibility would you like to gamble on?" Yuna asked. Seelith felt her hearts pounding in her chest as she watched this impossible standoff continue, as she saw a creature of nightmare held at bay by nothing more than words and a look. 2 minutes left until security arrived. The Kethral seemed to sense the time slipping away and grew more agitated, pacing back and forth again while keeping all 6 eyes fixed on Yuna, as if afraid to look away even for a moment. "I should kill you just to prove that I can," it said. "I should tear you apart right now and show you that all your words and stares mean nothing against real strength. You should." Yuna agreed. "If you are what you claim to be, if you are truly the apex predator that fears nothing and takes whatever it wants, then you should have attacked minutes ago instead of standing here talking." She tilted her head slightly. "But you are still talking. And we both know why." The Kethral made a sound that Seelith had never heard before, something between a growl and a whine. And for a moment it looked almost confused about what kind of noise it was making. "I hate your species," it said finally. "I hate your strange eyes, and your impossible calm, and your refusal to behave like prey should behave. I hate that you make me doubt myself when I should be confident of victory." Yuna said nothing. "And I hate," the Kethral continued, "that some part of me respects you for it. respects the insane courage it takes to stand in front of me and stare into my eyes as if you believe you are my equal. It took another step backward, and this time it did not seem angry at itself for retreating. Perhaps I will find easier prey elsewhere, it said. Perhaps this station has other beings who will run when I chase them and beg when I catch them and die without, making me question everything I know about the universe. Sealith dared to hope that the nightmare was ending. That somehow against all reason. This small human woman had talked and stared a monster into retreat. But then the cargo bay doors at the far end of the room opened, and station security finally arrived, and everything changed again. There were 5 of them. Kovathi guards with armored carapaces and stun weapons drawn. And they formed a line facing the Kethrol with practiced precision. Freeze, the lead guard commanded. You are under arrest for illegal entry, trespassing, and attempted assault on station residents. Surrender now, or we will use force. The Kethrol looked at the guards, then looked at Yuna, and something passed between the human, woman, and the predator that Sealith could not interpret, but could somehow feel, and then Kethrol lowered itself to the ground and placed its claws flat against the floor in the universal gesture of surrender. Sealith felt her legs begin to shake as the tension finally released from her body. The aftermath felt unreal to Sealith, like waking from a nightmare only to find that the nightmare had been happening in the waking world all along. And she stood frozen in place while chaos erupted around her. Station security swarmed over the Kethrol, applying heavy restraints to its limbs and muzzle, while the creature remained surprisingly docile. And Sealith noticed that it kept glancing back at Yuna even as it was being bound. More security personnel arrived, along with medical staff and officials in formal uniforms, who immediately began asking questions and recording statements. And somewhere in the confusion, Sealith heard her uncle's voice calling her name. Sealith, Torvan cried out as he pushed through the crowd of security officers, his bioluminescent skin flashing with every color of parental terror and relief. I heard there was an incident in the cargo levels, and I came as fast as I could. Are you hurt? Are you safe? What happened? Sealith tried to answer, but her voice would not cooperate. Her throat was tight with emotions she could not name, and all she could do was point at Yuna Park, who was quietly talking to a station official as if nothing unusual had occurred. The human, Torvan said, his skin shifting to confused yellows and greens. What about her? Was she involved somehow? She saved me, Sealith managed to whisper. She stood between me and the Kethrol, and she would not move, and she would not run, and she just looked at it until it was afraid of her. Torvan stared at his niece with obvious disbelief. A human frightened the Kethrol, he repeated slowly. A single unarmed human made an apex predator afraid. Sealith nodded, her skin glowing with the absolute certainty of what she had witnessed. Torvan was silent for a long moment, and then he crossed the cargo bay to where Yuna was standing and placed his hand over his chest in the Volanti gesture of deepest gratitude. I am Merchant Torvan of the Volanti trading family, he said formally, and you have saved the life of my niece, a debt that I can never fully repay, but which I will spend the rest of my days trying to honor. Yuna looked uncomfortable with the attention, shifting her weight from one foot to the other in a way that seemed almost shy. I was just doing my job, she said. Keeping the cargo level safe is part of what I am paid for. You were willing to die for a child you did not know. Torvan pressed. That is not part of any job description I have ever seen. Yuna shrugged, and the gesture was so casual that Sealith almost laughed despite everything that had happened. She was in danger, and I was there. Yuna said simply, that is all that matters. The Kethrol was being escorted toward the cargo bay doors, when it suddenly stopped and turned its massive head toward Yuna. Ignoring the protests of the security officers who were trying to move it along, human, it called out, and its voice echoed through the bay like thunder. I have a question before they take me away. Una turned to face the predator, and Seelith noticed that her eyes had that same calm stillness that had somehow held the creature at bay. Ask. Una said. If security had not arrived, the Kethril said. If you had been forced to fight me, what would you have done? What possible strategy could you have used against a creature like me? Una was silent for a moment, and then she reached down and pulled the scanner device from her belt. The same device she used for inspecting cargo. And she held it up for the Kethril to see. This has a power cell that can be overloaded, she said. I would have triggered it to explode and shoved it into your mouth when you tried to bite me. The Kethril stared at her. That would have killed you as well. It said, yes, Una agreed. But it would have killed you too, and then you could not have hurt Seelith. And that was all I cared about. The Kethril made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Only a strange kind of respect that Seelith would never have expected to see from such a creature. Your species is insane, it said. Completely and utterly insane. Probably, Una agreed. But it has kept us alive this long. The security officers finally managed to pull the Kethril through the doors, and Seelith watched it go with a mixture of relief and lingering fear and something else that she could not quite identify. She stayed on the station for 3 more days while the investigation was completed and the officials finished taking statements. And during that time, she sought out Una Park whenever she could. She found the human woman in the cargo bay again the very next day, back in her inspection work as if nothing had happened. And Seelith watched her from a distance for a long time before approaching. How are you so calm? Seelith asked finally. How can you go back to work after what happened as if it was just an ordinary day? Una looked up from her scanner and considered the question. Because it was an ordinary day, she said. I went to work, I did my job, and I came home safely. The fact that a predator tried to kill me does not change the basic facts of my routine. Seelith shook her head, her skin flickering with confused colors. But you almost died, she said. You stood in front of a Kethril and told it that you would fight it to the death. How can you act like that was normal? Una set down her scanner and gave Seelith her full attention. And the young Velanthe felt the weight of those strange calm eyes. I was terrified, Una admitted. Every moment of that confrontation I was more afraid than I have ever been in my life. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. And my hands wanted to shake so badly that I had to focus all my energy on keeping them still. Seelith's skin flickered with surprise. But you look so calm, she said. The Kethril kept saying that you did not seem afraid. That is the secret, Una said. We humans cannot control whether we feel fear, but we can control whether we show it. And we learned a long time ago that showing fear to a predator invites attack, so we learned to hide it, to bury it so deep that even we sometimes forget it is there. Seelith thought about this for a long moment. The Kethril said there was something in your eyes, she said, something that made it hesitate, something that felt dangerous even though you have no natural weapons. What was it seeing? Una smiled. And it was a warm expression that transformed her face from something unreadable into something almost gentle. It was seeing a human who had decided to protect someone, she said. And humans who have made that decision do not calculate odds or consider the strength of their enemy. They simply commit to the protection completely and let the universe sort out the rest. She paused. Your species evolved on a gentle world with few predators, so you never needed to develop that kind of commitment. But humans evolved on a death world where everything wanted to kill us. And we survived by refusing to give up, even when giving up was the sensible thing to do. Seelith nodded slowly, beginning to understand. When she returned home to her educational group a week later, the other young Velanthe gathered around her to hear about her adventure on the trading station. their skins glowing with excited colors as they demanded details. "What did you learn about humans?" one of her classmates asked. "What are they really like?" Celia thought about Una Park standing alone in front of a monster 3 times her size. Thought about those calm, dark eyes that had somehow contained all the fury and determination of a species that refused to die. "They are soft and small and easily broken," she said finally. "They have no claws and no fangs and no armor and no venom. And any predator in the galaxy could tear them apart in seconds." Her classmates looked confused. "Then why are they so successful?" one of them asked. "Why has their species spread across the galaxy if they are so weak?" Celia remembered the Kethrol in its detention cell. Remembered the look in its eyes as it was led away. The look of a predator that had encountered something it could not understand or defeat. "Because their eyes carry wars," she said. "And any predator that looks into those eyes will see its own death staring back." Her classmates did not understand. And Celia knew that they never would unless they saw it for themselves. But somewhere across the galaxy, in a detention cell on a trading station orbiting a gas giant, a Kethrol sat alone with its thoughts. Still unable to shake the memory of a small, soft human with calm, dark eyes who had refused to be afraid. And it wondered whether it would ever stop seeing that gaze when it closed its eyes to sleep.